Hello everyone, Kier here, and welcome to the InfiNOT podcast. I'm focused on the casual nature of the game, and each week I discuss the new patch, the new card, and my feelings on the game. I'm also a part of the Snap Judgments podcasting network, and I'm going to talk about Snap Judgments today. Yes, the one by Roy and Glazer, who started this whole megalopolis, as you might say. Yeah, I mean, this podcast is renowned for a reason. They have some great guests and some really in-depth discussion. So if you are listening to this podcast and you haven't checked out that one, definitely check it out. And they also are right now hosting the Snap Judgments League Season 6, if you have not signed up already. I believe the closing date for that is tomorrow, as of this coming out. So please go check that out too. That'll be on the Snap Judgments League Discord, and there are instructions there how to get signed up. As long as you're a Patreon member for only $2, you can get in. And I can speak from experience. I have played in a couple of tournaments already. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, definitely check it out. Now, let's hop into it. So, this week we actually have two cards, thanks to High Voltage, and sort of dropped out of nowhere with no announcement, and I'll talk a little bit about that after we preview the cards, but other than that, pretty chill week. Let's start with Infinity Ultron. Infinity Ultron is a 5/6 that says, on reveal, add 2 of Ultron's stones to your hand, and I'll go through those quickly. The Infinity Space Stone is a 3/4 that says, on reveal, move the lowest power enemy card here to the location of Infinity Ultron. The Infinity Reality Stone says, on reveal, add a drone here, set its power to Infinity Ultron's. That's a 3/1. The Infinity Power Stone is a 3/2 that says, double Infinity Ultron's power. The Infinity Mind Stone is a 3/2 that says, ongoing, your on-reveal abilities here happen twice. The Ultron Infinity Soul Stone is a 3/3 that says, on reveal, for each of your full locations, give one of your cards their +2 power. And lastly, the Infinity Time Stone is a 3/1 that says, on reveal, put a card from your hand here. So, if you're listening to this on audio and you don't have the card already, I'm sure that's really confusing. There's a lot of stones, and they all do their own thing, sort of similar to Thanos. The biggest difference here is that you have to play Infinity Ultron down, and he gives you 2 randomly. So, first of all, I think to address the elephant in the room, yes, his stats are not that good right now. On SnapFan, he's running a 46% win rate. And I think part of that is just that it's a big commitment to do on turn 5, and then you're spending your turn 6 trying to make that game plan work, depending on what stones you have. And now I'm going to talk about a deck that I made that I think actually mitigates a lot of the downsides, but let's sort of talk about what you want to do with this card. Because obviously, I think the strongest combo that's built into the card is you do something like the Infinity Power Stone, so you double Infinity Ultron's power, and then you add a drone with the Reality Infinity Stone. So that way you get a 12 power Infinity Ultron, and then you get a 12 power drone. But that's just okay, right? I mean, if you played a Gamora and a Hulk, you could get the same effect. So the, insane things you can do with this card usually happen because of the Infinity Mind Stone, which doubles your on-reveal abilities. But of course, the limiting factor with that is you have to choose one of the other stones, and if you don't get the Infinity Reality Stone or Infinity Power Stone, the other ones are just kind of bad. Like, the Infinity Space Stone, really, I have never seen it work. In my experience playing with it, oftentimes I'm trying to play Infinity Ultron onto a location to contest it, and my opponent can fill that location very easily. So, the chance that I'm moving a card is low anyway, and then on top of that, right, if he's 6 power and I'm moving, a 2/3, I'm helping lose that lane, unless I have another card that's really good, right? That one is really weird for me. The other one that's, really not great, in my opinion, is the Infinity Soul Stone. It gives each of your... No, it says for each of your full locations, give one of your cards their +2 power. So if you filled your board with cards and managed to play down both stones, you would be essentially getting a 3-9 in value, which is kind of not great. And again, it's spread, like, it's basically Ironheart, but with a way, way harder condition to meet. So I'm not a huge fan of the design of that one. I think the other ones all have a use case. The Ultron Time Stone is a gamble, but oftentimes you're getting, way above a 3 cost stats if you have some good cards in your hand, right? A 3-4 is going to make this essentially a 3-5. So if you get something bigger, like, I don't know, like a Black Panther, right? Suddenly it makes it more worth it. And then, again, I think the stars of the stones are the Reality Stone and the Power Stone, right? Because if you want to do something crazy, you can do like Infinity Mind Stone to double that on reveal, and then throw a Power Stone on there to make Ultron 24 power, right? That's pretty good. Or you could do something like put 2 drones that are 6 power in a lane, and it's essentially the same thing as doing the Infinity Power Stone into Reality Stone. So, like, all of this being said, it's one of those cards that I think a lot of people were really excited to try out, and it's just, in practice, all of these things just don't generate the same amount of value you can get by playing other combo cards. You're sort of relying on Infinity Ultron to seal the deal, but not all of his stones are that great, and so you're left with a very inconsistent card. The deck that I've been playing him in, and I haven't seen a lot of this, and I really think that it's the right direction that people should be looking into, is buffing him, right? Because you have 2 of his cards, 2 of his stones that depend on his power. And so, if you get one of them, it's going to be way stronger than if you had none. The easiest combo, of course, is with Galacta, but I'll go ahead and read out the list that I'm using with him. It's America Chavez, Zabu, Psylocke, Okoye, Nakia, Sebastian Shaw, Wong, Galacta, Scarlet Spider, Gwenpool, Black Panther, and Infinity Ultron. I do think that there's still some optimization to be done with this deck. I keep wanting to fiddle and change cards, but the basic idea here is you get, America Chavez or Zabu on 1. You buff the deck, or your hand with the cards like Okoye and Nakia, and then you have Wong and Galacta to really spike up power on your next couple of plays. You buff your Black Panther, Scarlet Spider, Sebastian Shaw, and Infinity Ultron, and oftentimes those game plans just sort of fall into place. What I like about Sebastian Shaw in this particular deck is, since he scales in your hand, people aren't going to know that you're about to drop a bomb, and if you get something like the Infinity Power Stone on Ultron, and let's say he's just buffed by Nakia, that's still a 5/14. And then you also play Sebastian Shaw, and that's like another, 14 power or something, right? Like, you can get really insane numbers on the last turn of the game. And again, Infinity Ultron gets exponentially better if he's buffed to a big number. Like, if Gwenpool and, I don't know, like a Okoye get him to 9 power, that's enough to be like a 5/18 if he gets the Power Stone. Or if you just play a Infinity Reality Stone, you're putting down another 9 power card, and then you can do something else, again, like Sebastian Shaw, or, whatever. The idea is just that Infinity Ultron by himself is not enough of a payoff in order to get value. I feel like you have to do something to him, either ramping him out, which is a popular strategy that I've seen, right? So that way you have more time to try to make something out of his abilities, or you buff his power and then use his Infinity Stones with, like, Wong to get even more value, right? So I could go Infinity Power Stone onto the Wong lane, and that's already getting me to a high number. So, like, all of this put together, what do I think about the card? I feel like he's just a little understated right now. In order to get the most out of his ability, it feels like you have to put in a lot of work for something that doesn't always win you the game. There are just way easier combos that could effectively do the same thing. There is some, surprise factor, and I think if more people were to try the buff strategy, that have a little bit more success. So for me, I'm going to put him at a 3 out of 5. personally. Like, I'm having fun with them. The deck that I'm using is doing okay. I think some randoms have used this deck and not done so well. Just checking my win rate on SnapFan, I'm currently sitting at 52 and some change percent win rate with him, which isn't amazing, but it's playable, certainly. And honestly, a lot of what that boils down to is that there's just a lot of really mean decks in the meta right now. Like, I'm thinking of Scream and Discard and Clog, all of which can hurt this deck. So I don't know if this is the right time for this card or if people just aren't, utilizing his strengths. It's hard to say, but I'm going to go 3 out of 5 for right now. I could definitely see it going down if I don't continue to see improvement, but I really just think we could see some more experimentation with this card and see some success. Moving on to the other card that we got this week, thanks to the high voltage mode, it's Toxie Doxie. Toxie Doxie is a 2/1 that says, on reveal, give 2 cards to your hand plus 2 power. You can't play them next turn. So, I gotta be honest. This might be the first card I've seen that I don't feel excited to get. And it's not because I think that she's really bad. It's just I don't think that she's very interesting. It's also strange because we've seen Dum Dum Duggan in the data mines for a while now, and we sort of assumed that it would go along with the what if theme, but I don't know. It just hasn't ended up that way. And we're left with a card that just feels alright. You're essentially getting 2/5 in stats, and if you're playing a buff deck, that can increase, but you have to be playing a very specific buff deck, right? Since she's hitting 2 cards in your hand and you can't play them next turn, if you're not drawing extra cards, you're basically top decking and hoping to get some good stuff to play in the meantime while the other 2 cards in your hand are sitting there. This is fine if you play her on 2 and you hit something like Scarlet Spider or Black Panther, but those aren't the only payoffs that you can use for a buff deck, and so, I don't know. She feels weird to me. I've seen some gameplay with her, and I'm not, super excited to play her. She's still very new, so I don't want to make any assumptions, but I don't know. I'm not super impressed, and I would probably, for the first time in a while, I'm just gonna get to the credits section in high voltage, and I'll probably call it a day. I don't need Toxie Doxie. Especially because we have Gwenpool, where, you're getting better stats, you have the ability to scale higher, and you can play all the cards. So, I understand that there are some circumstances where this card might be good, but I'm gonna give it, a 2 out of 5. Maybe 2.5. It's playable, right? The scaling that she can give is nice, but I don't know. I don't think that she fits in a lot of decks, and unless you're banking on Sunspot, I feel like you're just going to be wasting a lot of energy when you could have spent that on a Forge and gotten a fairly similar effect, right? So, I don't know. With these 2 cards this week, honestly, I feel like a lot of people aren't feeling the best about it, and with the lackluster OTA last week, it feels weird, man. This meta right now feels really up and down. All of my good cards lists are just not working again, which might just be a case of me running into the 80s where people are trying to use the best statistically good decks, and I'm running some off-meta stuff, so I'm just not going to be as prepared for things. I made an anti-meta list, and that helped me get past the hump of the mid-80s, but now it's I don't know. I'm not having a ton of fun in the game, and maybe you can let me know if you sympathize. For me, I have fun building decks and trying new things, but it just feels like I can't really do that in metas like this because the predominant strategies are just so powerful and so disruptive. Specifically Scream and Clog are really disruptive. You have to be running, very specific decks in order to get around those. And Discord just goes way higher than most of the decks I can play. So that's sort of how I'm feeling this week. We obviously don't know if these cards are going to, get any better. I'd be interested to see some more Infinity Ultron stuff. I think it's a really cool card, but we'll just have to hold our breath. If there's one thing that you could do for me, it's actually rating and commenting on this podcast. And if there's one thing that you can remember, it's that I'm InfiNOT. Thanks for listening.